Well, this is not a boat accident. It wasn't any propeller, it wasn't any coral reef, and it wasn't Jack the Ripper. It was Lou Diamond.
It's time to take an inside look at those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today on Thrive Loud, we have a keynote speaker, relationship-based business strategist who has been recognized as a networking expert. He is the author of the best-selling book, Croissants versus Bagels, Strategic, Effective, and Inclusive Networking at Conferences. He's been profiled in the Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and Fast Company. He is the host of On the Schmooze podcast, and we're going to schmooze and connect right here. Thrive Loud listeners, Robbie Samuels. Robbie, how are you today?
Doing fantastic. Thanks so much for having me, Lou.
So I was recently on Robbie's show. He is so impressive. He's a great listener. He's also a great networker, and we both love to connect. What I'd like to do is kind of learn a little bit about how this became your superpower right out of the gate, and then we'll get into some specifics. Does that sound like a plan, Robbie?
Sure thing.
Okay. Where did this superpower of networking come from?
Gosh, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, it's something I've always been kind of drawn to because I like people. But I will say that I really harnessed this superpower when I started teaching it to other people, because teaching is a great way to learn and to clarify what you do instead of just innately relying on instinct. And so I was running a meetup group that had grown to thousands of members and hundreds of events. But at the very beginning, we were very worried about the group becoming cliquey. So we invited our regulars out for coffee. About 17 of them came together and we said, hey, this is what we've been trying to do. A year in, the culture is great. They're, oh no, it's the friendliest group we've ever been to. Everyone's so welcoming. We're like, okay, we want that to continue to be the case. So we want you to be a clique that's not cliquey. And that really, they were like, what? What does that even mean? So I was like, can you come, 15 minutes early? Because the newest people are always most awkward. And can you, maybe help out at the front door, handing out name tags, signing people in, that kind of thing. Oh, sure. And then I said, okay, and then just just be around the room, work the room, engage with people. And that's when I got a lot of deer in headlights responses, because out of those 17 or so people, a large majority were shy and or introverted. And so it wasn't their natural state to schmooze. And so when I started helping them, and eventually it turned into a talk that I've now been doing for like a dozen years, that's really when I think I was aware of not just my ability to network, but the power of convening became crystal clear to me. Because I think that there's people who are influencers, there are people who are connectors, and there are people who are conveners or hosts. And I now recognize the power of being that convener or that host. So I
like to think more that the purpose of networking is not to network or add to your network. The purpose is to connect. Mm-hmm. And you have this sort of inclusive networking way of thinking. Is the end goal of your version of what you think the keys to networking, is it to grow close, powerful, tight relationship, or is it to expand your reach?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that innovation comes from the outer edges of our network. So to have too tight a circle, and not let anyone else in means to kind of just have people who agree with you, have the same lived history as you, and won't really add a lot. You're all just agreeing with each other. So I think you want to make sure you are obviously staying tight with that innermost circle. But I also think about how do you nurture and sustain connections with the second and third layers out from that. And that could be people you see once a year at a conference or that you worked with 5 or 10 years ago. So I believe that there's a lot of it is actually about nurturing people you've already connected with at some point in your life or your career, as well as a small percentage of that effort is expanding. So it's not networking just to add people to your network, as in like a let's collect business cards kind of way. It's more about nurturing and sustaining those connections.
So let's talk about that, the sustaining the relationships. I know you can have a great conference, meeting, connect with people at one of those networking events, even the ones that you've hosted, and it could be awesome at that time. Talk to me about follow-up. You have any certain tips or recommendations that our listeners can say, hey, what's a do and a don't, I guess, as it relates to the best ways to follow up with those that you meet?
Well, the do is make sure you do it, and the don't is don't forget to do it, I guess, in the very simplest terms. Lou, when I was writing my book, I was trying to think about how to structure it. What were the sections going to be? And everyone I talked to said, well, easy. It's going to be like before the event, during the event, and after the event. But follow-up is one of these things that you're most likely to do it if you're thinking about it before you even go to the event. It's not just a practice that you do after the event. So one of my best sort of tips for this is to actually draft your follow-up message, your follow-up email draft before you head to the event. Because I don't think you should go to every event. I think you should be selective. And so if you're being selective, why this event? Who are you hoping to meet? What are you hoping to learn? What do you want to share with people? What are you there to offer? So getting sort of your couple sentences written out. I mean, you're going to personalize this. You're going to write, how you met someone and maybe what you're asking them to do or how to follow up and meet with you. But just to get your head in the game. And then I think during the event, it's about tracking the cards that you really want to prioritize following up with from the cards that were just sort of handed to you. We've all had that moment, Lou, you're standing in one of those tight circles, which is the bagels part of the croissants and bagels. And someone starts some guy's handing out his card, and then everyone's like, oh, we're doing that. And so everyone starts, like you're at a poker game. You're suddenly handed 6 cards. Those cards should not have equal weight to the person that you spoke to for 20 minutes. That, you want to make sure you don't lose track of that card. So in Western cultures, I just tell people, turn the corner down, if nothing else, so that when you drop your cards on the table, those will stick out to you. If you've got a pen, write a note in the back. And then if you have pre-scheduled an hour within a couple of days of coming back from an event to do your follow-up, the chances of you now doing it are very high because you have some sort of draft. You're not staring at a blank page. You have the higher priority cards sort of kept in a separate pile, and you have time on your calendar to actually do it. And so if you go to fewer events, but you actually follow up, I think you're just going to get way more out of those experiences.
I'm gonna share with you a lesson I learned recently, and I think eventually I'll be able to share more about it. It has to do with, in the period of time that you're meeting someone, the later that the business card is exchanged, as close to literally walking away, the more powerful and the stronger the connection will be in the future. What do you think about that?
I think that makes sense because a lot of okay, my worst case examples of the latter, which is the people who hand you their cards first, are the pushy salespeople. And mostly my experience, that's been a lot of real estate people. And I want to say for the record, I have friends that are real estate people that really get this and know how to do relationships really well. And they don't do the pushy sales card. But there was a conference once where a woman had her cards she was fanning them out in front of her, and as people went by, she was just handing them to people. And I sort of tried to engage her in a conversation. It didn't really go anywhere because instead of engaging with me, she was just looking to hand her card out to passerbys. And then a year later, she's standing there, her and a friend are both standing there with their cards splayed out. And she says, oh, here's my card. And this is the photographer taking her friend's card who took my picture. And I simply said, thank you, and walked away. So zero trust built, no interest, really just a story for my talk, the don't version of what to do. But I think when you are engaging with someone to the point where they're like, wow, I really want this to continue. And you're thinking let's both find time to continue this conversation. That's the very sort of nascent part of a relationship. Just talking to someone isn't the relationship. Right. It's when you're both hey, we should find, where are you going to be next week? Or can we meet for coffee? Or, hey, well, here's my card. Let's make sure we find a time to connect again. That's where it starts. Now there's more to do, but that's true. I think the later you hand it out, sort of, it's people are almost asking you for it at that point.
Well, what's really interesting is, and having spoken at events, and many times after you do the event, many of the people are coming up and they're talking to you after. And if you're not giving out a book or they're coming over and doing kind of a meet and greet, what I will tell you is that many of them really are interested. And if they're asking for your business card at this point, you've done something wrong, because odds are you probably left it up on the screen or some, marketing direction that you could send them. However, I do like those that might come in and say, listen, I want to connect you to somebody. Do you have a card? Because someone who's not in attendance here that I want to make sure I have the introduction. Can I get that from you? And actually, that's the only instance where if they start off early of asking for the card at the beginning part, that I would say that there's something there. But that's not for them. That's usually for someone else. Mm-hmm. So just an interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing your 2 cents on that. And we're kind of agreement on that. So I love these 2 items. And I don't think I'd be able to equally choose them if I saw them in front of them. Croissants and bagels. I love them both. Do you love one more than the other?
I'm so I was raised in New York. I was also raised Jewish. And so a good bagel with a schmear is still a favorite of mine. New York bagels rule. I actually eat them very, very infrequently here in Boston, Massachusetts. But I've been told that there are croissants in the world that will rival any bagel, and so I can't say I could choose between the 2. But when it comes to how people are in a room, they're really illustrations of body language. So I'm happy to kind of illustrate that.
Yeah, let's give the listeners the high level view for that, and that'll make it easier for your book and your links and stuff.
Fantastic. So I've been speaking about this sort of networking tip for probably the last 10 or 12 years, and actually I knew it was a pretty good thing, but then years later I would go to someplace and they'd say, oh, you're the croissant guy, you spoke here 4 years ago, but I've only been here for 2 years. But every time we get ready for a regional meeting, we get reminded about not bageling, and like the hey, stop bageling is like become a mantra around here, and I never really knew the origin. And so I was like fascinated that years later, this was sort of being shared, through generations of the workforce. So, and then Dory Clark actually wrote about it in her second book, Stand Out, which also helped me realize, like, this is it. This is a cool idea. People stand in these networking circles. If you walk into a networking event, people tend to stand in these tight clusters, these shoulder-to-shoulder huddles that are impossible to break into. And if you're a new person, you've never been there, you're a first-timer, even if you're not shy, even if I'm a pretty outgoing, gregarious extrovert, and I totally feel awkward when I walk in a room and everyone's all clustered up and it's clear they're all best friends, whether they are or they're not. It's in my head. But if you're in one of those circles, if you're in what I'm now calling bagels, then you can actually be sharing a gift with the room by shifting your body language to be more open. And by recognizing that it is your intention to meet people, which is why you left your house. So you don't just go to events for content, just this is a podcast you're listening to. So clearly you can get great content from the comfort of your home. We leave our house to go to events for the possibilities of connections. But if we're closed off in those bagels, whether it's with one other person or 4 other people, then it's less likely that will happen. So by matching your body language to be open to the same like intention you have around connecting, that's the croissant, by shifting and making space for others to join you. And it's if you're new to the space and you look for those openings, that you'll have a much easier time navigating the room than trying to sort of break your way in, like a bagel with locks. That's impossible.
Right. I was actually going to say something funny. The most interesting when trying to make a choice between eating a croissant and a bagel, but you would never put the same items on either one. You're certainly not having lox and cream cheese on a croissant. It's just not happening.
Not happening.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go here before we get to the regular flow of the show. At the time of this recording, we are recording this in mid-March, and I am in the New York area. You are just outside the Boston area, as our listeners will now learn. And we are truly in the midst of this pandemic of COVID-19, the novel coronavirus. Mm-hmm. And many things have been shut down. I forget about every sporting activity or open venue, meetings, conferences, groups, offices. there is this huge challenge, and specifically conferences and networking opportunities. You were chatting with me before we hit record. Share with the listeners, I guess, ways in this environment that we can extend networking when we're not actually able to meet in person.
Yeah, I mean, it is a shame because meeting in person is so powerful, but because we have these other tools, we shouldn't ignore networking and sustaining those connections. In fact, in some ways, it's even more important. Social distancing shouldn't equal social isolation, right? So we have to find a way to pair all this together. So I wrote an article. It's up on my LinkedIn. It's called 9 Ways to Network During a Pandemic. And
we will put links to it in the show notes.
So, I mean, for one is if you were planning to go to an event that got canceled and you already know some people that you were planning to see, reach out to them and schedule a coffee chat virtually. Do a Zoom call, do a Facebook chat on video or something like that. You can host a virtual peer-led discussion on a topic that had attracted you to going to the event in the first place. I mean, sometimes you think you can't do that unless you're the expert, but really you just attract people into the room. I remember being at a conference where the presenter didn't show up and we were about to all leave. And I said, but hey, you guys just want to talk about this? And we got so much value out of that conversation, So it sometimes just kind of putting an open sign, let's make this happen. Another option is to just start hosting virtual happy hours. I'm going to start doing this. I've seen a few other people who are also in our connector space started talking about doing this kind of thing. It's here's the time and day. I'm going to be on a Zoom call. Whoever wants to pop by, beverage of your choice. Let's catch up. In some ways, it's a great time to go look back at the people that you haven't had a chance to talk to in a while and reach out to them. This is like a reflect on who you've sort of not been in touch with and use this as an opportunity to do that. Those are just a few of the ideas.
Yeah, I love it. And they're all very helpful. I wanted to share that what I was explaining to my very, very upset daughter, who's a senior in high school, who's upset because so many things around her world are canceling. Obviously,
that's so hard.
It's hard on all fronts. However, there's another part of this, and that is, look, this too shall pass, and everyone's being prudent and doing the things you need to do. And to your point, these networking opportunities, when the world enables and presents itself, will be in high demand because we will crave wanting to go meet and connect people. To your point, Robbie, very spot on. You can do all the virtual stuff as much as you want. We still need that in-person networking opportunity, the way to connect with others. We need to meet with people in our companies in that same way. So consider it a bridge and use this time, I guess, as a bridge is really those great tactics. I like the happy hour thing. I actually think that happy hour thing is going to go through. I don't know if whenever there are crises or problems, the one industry that never, ever has any issues is the alcohol industry. So liquor, a lot of drinking, there might be some early happy hours in this environment we're in. But thank you for those tips.
Can I just share one more, which is, I think it would be great to send a note of appreciation to event organizers. They are making some super difficult decisions. The weight of the world is on them. Financially, they're probably taking some hits. They're trying to make it right for everybody. So taking time to appreciate those folks right now can go a long way to building those relationships. And the other thing I just want to say is that there are people whose lives are intertwined with either the meetings industry or the travel industry who are particularly going to get a hard hit. This is not going to be a quick rebound for them. And some of those people work gig to gig. This is like paycheck to paycheck kind of thing. So think about that. And what my wife and I are doing, we're actually donating to our local food pantry because we expect there's going to be an increase in demand from people who were making ends meet but suddenly can't. So just being part of a community, really taking this time to be really community minded, whenever you're generous in spirit in that way, I think people are going to remember that. That's going to pay itself forward in lots of unexpected ways in the future. Or you could just hold yourself up and isolate in a scared scarcity kind of way, in which case you'll have missed this opportunity to support a community around you.
Robbie, you've got a thoughtfulness for community. You like to bring networks together. You've got terminologies from your book that's being used in everyday language as it relates to business connecting, which means that you're thriving on most days. However, all of us, and the time you and I are right now, we're all not quite kicking on all cylinders with all the things going on around us. Yet we still found the energy to do this lovely podcast. So what I love to ask guests on the program, Robbie, is on days when you have trouble thriving, who or what practice do you seek to get back on the thriving track?
Well, to me, relationships are the answer to every business and every life challenge. So there's always a person on the other end of this that perks me back up. I mean, no matter how tired I was. I mean, yesterday I was dragging a little bit. Like I'm a little physically fatigued. I've been juggling a lot more childcare than I have in the past, and work stress, and yet going into a 90-minute meeting where I was doing a virtual facilitation. Just being around those folks and facilitating that meeting, like really kind of got my energy back up in a big way. Again, I am an extrovert, so that does help me in those moments, even virtually. But I have a little mantra that I carry. I wrote it like a decade ago at a workshop, and it's on this little Post-it note. It says, "I am enough. I have enough. I choose to live with abundance." And whenever I find myself thinking the world is falling, apart and nothing's going right kind of thoughts, I have to remind myself of that. And it really does help. It gets me sort of recentered on my purpose.
Awesome. Let's do this. Share with the listeners, if you could, Robbie, all the plugs and places and things that people can find you, websites, URLs, social media stuff. We will put it all in the show notes. However, it always gets more engagement when they hear it directly from you.
Great. Well, my website is robbiesamuels.com. And if you go to robbiesamuels.com/thrive, you'll get to download my 10 tips for conference connections, which is a little 3-page sort of cheat sheet of some ideas that are in my book. My book is available at croissantsvsbagels.com, also on my website. And my podcast is On the Schmooze. And you can see all the archived episodes, nearly 200 of them, at ontheschmooze.com. And I hope people do connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm starting to share a lot more content there. I just shared the 9 ways to network during a pandemic on there as well. So yeah, people can definitely find me in all those places and say hello.
I have this visual of a whole bunch of people in a Brady Bunch-like room in Zoom, all with cocktails. And the only negative would be that somebody might see some food that one sees on the other thing. Like, man, I could go for those little pigs in a blanket right now. But what are you going to do? You just have to deal with your drink. All right, Robbie, let's go down Fun Street here. We're going to go through some standard questions on Thrive Loud, see how you share this information with our listeners. First of all, what is your all-time favorite movie?
When Harry Met Sally.
And why does this movie connect so much with you?
It's funny because it's also my wife's favorite movie. It's definitely something we bonded on. I think it's because I love how the relationship between the two main characters evolves over a lifetime, and the intertwined nature of it, and how I always suspected that I was going to marry a friend, I guess from a very early age. And so I think that was why I think I was really drawn to that movie. And my wife was my friend before we got married. So it I think is something that I was looking for, and I just really enjoy it. And I love how it ends as well. So I don't know. It's just it's a good feel-good movie.
I recently watched that movie, and there's 2 parts of this movie we could talk about real quickly. Obviously, one, the whole concept, which is the theme of the movie, which you've gently alluded to here, which is, men and women can't be friends because the sex thing gets in the way. And it's such a wonderful concept because it is the theme of the entire movie and how it all comes together. But the other part of the movie that makes it so great is what's weaved in between it. And I just recently rewatched it, and all of those older couples that are sitting on a couch featured as to how they met and when they met, and these stories and maybe certain stereotypes affiliated with the types of people as well, which is hysterical. It's actually even funnier today than it was when I first saw it in the late 80s. I don't know. Do you appreciate that component of the movie?
Oh, totally. I mean, that piece where it's they got on the elevator and
9 extra floors.
9 extra floors. Yeah, no, yeah, those are great. Those are great. This is a movie that for many, I'm going to say decades, not just years. It's been a goal of mine to watch it every New Year's Eve. It's not a goal. It's not a goal I've managed to keep up recently, but Yeah, there's been many, many years where it's a movie that I would queue up in time for it to end about 15 minutes before the ball drop. And
I'm gonna give a little just a preview. When the movie came out in the late 80s, I had a friend who lived on the block where they were filming the Christmas tree carrying scene. So, the two of them in year one grab a tree and get a tree together, and you see them lift it up and do it. And then the next one you see a year later is when Sally's dragging the tree through the snow and, having trouble with it. That was all filmed obviously at the same time. And it's actually really fun because he said he could watch it. It probably took them all night to film that particular scene.
Right. So. That's pretty fun.
Is there a certain jam that the schmooze Robbie has when he needs to kick himself into gear, get himself up, or get himself moving and motivated?
Oh gosh, did I actually share something ahead of time? Because I can't think of anything now.
You did not? No.
I will just tell you that I'll share with listeners. There is a singer that I met in college. Her name is LP, and she was the head of a band back then called Lionfish. She then went solo, and one day I remember walking into Starbucks and they were playing her music. I recognized her voice on overhead. I was like, oh my God, she's made it. So I went and dug up her old stuff, which is not available. And it's one of my favorite Pandora stations. You just say, play music by LP. And she's got a very haunting voice. It's just, it's a lot of fun. And because she's not like super mainstream, I also feel a little in the know because I knew her when. But it's nice. It gets me kind of into a groove.
Robbie Samuels, I feel great because we got to schmooze here. I got a chance to be on your show. I'm glad to return the favor, and I want to thank you for coming on. And yeah, man, let's happy health. Wash your hands. Actually, I'm going to amend what you said. What did you say? There's something about social distancing, but you don't need social
isolation.
You don't need social media distancing.
Yeah,
I guess we're going to get closer together that way.
Well, it's keep calm and keep networking.
Exactly. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, Robbie.
Thank you.
And to all our Thrive Now listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.